Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Pei Beis Amud Beis, 10 lines from the bottom. After the Gemara had taught us that when a woman makes an Eruv Techumin, she includes her son, her child who is dependent upon her. Now the Gemara speaks about how one can make an Eruv Techumin for their children and others as well. Says the Gemara, Tonu Rabbanon, Me'arev Adam Ayidei Benoi Ubitoi HaKetanim. A person may make an Erev Chatzeros for his children who are Ketanim, who are not of age yet. That means they're not of Bar Mitzvah. Al Yidei Avdoi V'Shivchosoi HaKnanim. They can make them for their Avodim who are Avodim Kenanim. Bein Ledaiton, Bein Shaloi Ledaiton. Whether they are knowledgeable, that means they have consent, or without their consent. In other words, since the children who are ketanim are dependent upon their parents, and since the avodim are also owned entirely by their owner, therefore, when an eruv is made on their behalf, it's even without their knowledge. Aval eino ma'arev lo yayidei avdoi v'shivchosai ha'ivrim. But one cannot make an Eruv for his Eved Ivri. An Eved Ivri is a Jew that was sold into slavery because either he stole or he sold himself into slavery. And although he has to work until the Shemitah comes, but nonetheless, he's somewhat independent in the sense that he's not completely owned by his master. And also one may not make an Eruv for his children who are Gedolim, unless against with their consent, and not for his wife. Ella midaitam, there has to be with their knowledge, with their consent. Otherwise, one cannot make an Eruv for them. Tanya Idoch, another Brisa states something very similar. Lo ya'arev adam ayidei b'noi ubitoi hagedolim. One may not make an Eruv for his children who are of age, v'ayidei avda v'shivchos ha'ivrim, and not for his Eved Ivri v'lo ayidei ishtoi, and not for his wife Elami Daitan. Again, as we saw in the previous brisa, this must be with their consent. Since Eruv Techumin has a tzad that could be choiv, because when a person makes Eruv Techumin in one direction, it prevents him from then going in the opposite direction. So if he puts an Eruv Techumin down 2,000 amos to the east, so it precludes him from going then to the west, whereby if the child or the Eved does not want to go in that direction, it would be considered to be a choiv. So therefore it has to be with the knowledge of the one you're making Erev Techumin. The exception, however, as we see in our brisas, are when it comes to children who are ketanim or an Eved Knaini. Aval ma'arev hu ayidei avdo v'shivchos ha'knaini v'ayidei benoi ubitoi ha'ketanim. Bein ledaitim, bein shelo ledaitim. Why? The Brisa concludes, because their hands are his hand, meaning to say they are in the domain, they're in the jurisdiction of their master or of their parent. V'kulan she'irvu ve'eruv alein rabban, and the Brisa concludes, and all of them, when they make their own eruv, and if their Rav makes another Eruv in a different direction, Yoitzim b'shel Rabban, then they are Yoitzim with their Ravs, with their master's Eruv, even though it's in a different direction. Chutz min ha'isha, mimnei sheyechola limchos, with the exception of a wife, because she can go ahead and protest, and therefore she does not have to then use her husband's Eruv Techumin. Ask the Gemara the obvious question. We just saw in the Brisa that not only is an Isha, but a child who is a Gadol and an Eved who is an Eved Ivri, they all have independence. So why did it stay over here? The exception is the Isha. If the master, in this case the husband, makes an Eruv, why is it only that the Isha who makes an Eruv in the other direction does not have to follow the Eruv of her husband? Why don't you say the same thing by the children, and in regards to the Eved Knaini as well? Omar Rabbi explains, Isha v'kol the damilo. It's lav dafka Isha. It's also anybody who is similar to her, and therefore it would be children who are gedolim as well as an Eved Ivri. Ask the Gemara, Omar, once we bring the statement Chutz min ha'isha mnei sheyichol limchos, that a woman is an exception because she can go ahead and protest. Taima demachi, the diuk would be then because she can protest. If she protests, then she doesn't follow her husband's Eruv Techumin. Otherwise, she must follow her husband's Eruv. Hostama nafka midbaila. But the diuk would be, if it would not be a protest, she would then go after her husband's Eruv. Ask the Gemara, if that's so, without a protest, then she goes after her husband's Eruv, Haktani Reisha Elamidaitam. It states earlier in the Brisa that it has to be with their knowledge. My lab, the Amri'in, is it not talking about where they actually explicitly say, yes, I want to go ahead and use your Eruv? And therefore that would contradict this, because this implies that a passive, without even, as long as there's no protest, they also must follow their husband, or in this case their father or their master's Eruv. The Gemara says, Loi, my elamidaitum. What does it mean when it says elamidaitum? The ashtiku means that they're quiet. That means they're passive silence. It also means that they're going to accept and follow their father's or their master's Eruv. To the exclusion if they were to protest and say, no, we don't want to follow your Eruv, we made an Eruv in a different direction. Asked the Gemara, Vekulon she'irvu ve'eruv alein rabban. But it states in the end of the Brisa that in all these situations, if they make an Eruv and their master makes an Eruv, then you go basar, you go after the master's Eruv. That implies that even if there is silence, you'll go after the master's Eruv, because that's the Stama. Says the Gemara. You'll go after the master's V'stamu. They're talking about Stama, and it says the exception is that of a woman, which is mashma. If a woman is merely silent, she does not go after her husband's Eruv. Answers the Gemara, Amarove, Kivan she'eruvu. When it says that they made an Eruv, that itself is already considered to be a protest. By making an Eruv, by definition, in a different direction than the other one's Eruv, shows that they're not interested, they don't want to then go ahead and use that Eruv. So therefore, in all these cases, that would then be the case that it's considered to be a protest. But if there's a silence, then indeed the silent is in a way of acquiescing and saying that they are fine with either the husband or the master's Eruv.